everyone, and welcome to another episode of LocReady. I'm Lynn, and today we're joined by Kirill Soloviev, who is the co-founder and CEO at ContentQuo, which is a translation quality management SaaS company that enables language service providers, in-house localization teams, and government translation departments to manage and scale their quality programs. Kirill has a 20-year history of executing localization programs at a macro scale as a translator and software localization engineer, to a macro scale as a localization program manager, to a director of localization services. While he's currently based in Estonia, Kirill has been a speaker for Global SAKE, the American Machine Translation Association, or AMTA, Translating Europe Forum, and more. Fun fact, Kirill loves to learn and play different musical instruments. His most recent passion is the four-string banjo, while he also dabbles in drums, percussion, ukulele, mandolin, guitar, as well as the Irish tin whistle and flute. We invite Kirill today to learn more about his work in localization quality management and starting his own company in the localization industry. Please help me welcome Kirill Soloviev.
Like Link said, it's really great to be here, and it's a pleasure to be chatting to MEIS students. So when I first had the chance to actually go into the MEIS campus back in April this year for the first time of my life, I was really happy. I've heard so many stories about the place that just, going through the campus was actually quite an experience. So being here, even virtually, is kind of fun. I've done quite a number of things in this industry and outside this industry as well, writing different parts of the world to spread the good word about localization, quality management, and whatnot. I've been doing this for over 20 years right now, and the story how I kind of got into localization is a bit funny. So it's a significant part of my life. I've never actually had any other job than localization, starting all the way back in 2002. And, growing up, I was really fortunate because my mom was an English teacher. So kind of picked up a second language really, really early on. And then I actually did not decide to study languages, quite the contrary. So I enrolled into a computer science program. And that was in 2002 when my university professor, who was teaching a class on operating systems, of all things, actually issued a call for volunteers who would help him translate a book on his subject. So my English was pretty good. I've never done any translation before that point, but I said, yeah, hell yeah. And this is kind of how I got my first space, so translating a book on operating systems. We did not have any CAD tools back in the day, but funnily enough, we actually did collaborative translation via email. So we had a glossary, we had an editor. So it was very low tech, but the process itself was actually quite solid. So this is kind of how I got into this game. And soon after, I realized that I'm not a great translator, but I love revising work done by other people and pointing out their mistakes. So this is kind of what eventually led to me, co-founding ContentQuo. And this is what I now get to do 20 years later, what I basically get to help other people do. So make it easy to give feedback on other people's translations and ultimately make all of them a little bit better through the power of feedback. Took a while for me to get to the stage. So I started on the agency side first, and that was actually my first job. So localization engineering and localization project management. I've learned kind of the core, what it takes to manage localization back in the day. This is actually where I first met the quality angle as well. So I was assigned to the Microsoft account at the LSP where I was working, and they were really advanced. Remember, this is like 2002, 2003. They already had a language quality program back in the day. So they had the scorecards, they had their typologies, the formulas, kind of the full-blown process, the real deal. So that was kind of my first encounter, was the wonderful domain of language quality. And then after I left the agency job, I switched to the buyer side. And I ran localization at what now is a unicorn tech company. So when I left, I was the global director of localization. Done a few things around software in particular. It really frustrated was how language quality is being managed between, us, the buyers, and our suppliers and LSPs. And this is ultimately what led to me co-founding ContentQuo in early 2015 to kind of trying to solve the complexities of the interaction that happened between the buyer side and the vendor side of the industry when trying to figure out, okay, are those translations really as good as they tell us? Can we shape them to be a better fit for the target market? So yeah, we launched in 2018 and kind of never looked back. So that about wraps up how I got into this about 20 years earlier.
I love that story. And I love how it started just from wanting to explore other people's translations and like kind of pinpoint those quality issues. Because I do that every day as like a teacher as well.
Might have made a good teacher. Unfortunately, my mom was one, so that actually did not compel me to go into that line of business. So I kind of chose, linguistic quality instead, which is almost as good.
Our first question really is geared towards that as well. So, Jihong, would you like to ask it?
My question is, what brought you into this localization industry? Maybe you have answered a part of it, and why you want to keep you into this industry for more than 20 years? Yeah.
That's a really good question. I hope I explained my trajectory a little bit, so maybe I could, deliberate a little bit about what keeps me here. First, this industry is super diverse. And I think I did not understand that from the beginning. When you're a freelance linguist, you kind of get, locked down with a language pair or maybe a couple of language pairs that and this limits your understanding of the potential scope. But then when I started to move across a different side of the industry, I discovered how multifaceted this job really is. And I think especially on the buyer side, because, when you're in an enterprise localization team, you get to work cross-functionally, you kind of get to see a slice of the entire company, right? Starting from the product team, marketing team, whatever, technical support, legal, training, basically everything that you need to run a company is passing through localization at some stage, right? And I think when I discovered that and the real impact that localization has on business, this is when I realized, wow, this is really cool. And I think this was also a very natural progression for me to start my own company eventually, because I saw, being a localization program manager back in the day and then a global director, how businesses actually run, how software businesses run at scale. So this is super interesting. And being fortunate enough to have been now on three sides of this industry. So first, the kind of supplier side, including both freelance and agency, then the buyer side, and now the technology vendor side. Every part of the journey helps me see like another part of this picture, right? So I've actually learned probably as much in the past couple of years as I did in the previous 10 or so, right? That's kind of the benefit of building your own company, jumping down from a cliff while putting your parachute on. This is what the people in the startup world say. So yeah, basically you can never stop learning if you enter the world of localization. And then there's so many career tracks to explore and so many angles that you can use to slice up the world. I think it never gets boring, really. This is what kept me on board for so long.
Wow, that's really a long journey for doing that. And how did you come up with the idea of creating a localization quality product when having your own company?
I'll answer the second part of the question first, kind of coming to the realization that, it's time to actually start your own business. That was a difficult part. And then figuring out which product to build, that was actually the easy part. It was kind of born out of frustration, really, right? Or necessity. So when I left my job as a localization director, I actually wanted to work in the States, okay? And so for about 6 months, I was actually pursuing different career openings in the States. But even back in 2014, which is when I left my corporate job, it was kind of tough for non-US visa holders to enter the country and get a job. And I actually did not know that MIS exists and could be a great vehicle to achieve that. So I was just ignorant, basically. So I was trying to apply, and it was basically impossible for me to progress because it's kind of hard to get hired in the States if you don't have a visa and work permit. So I finally gave up. And so this company was actually born out of frustration, right? So I started to think, okay, I've done, a number of things by now. I cannot really make progress in the career that I wanted. So are there any other things in this industry that I have not done yet? Well, and it turned out that I never tried to build my own technology and actually launch it to the market. So this is kind of what we started with my co-founder in what was, I think, January 2015, right? So we got together and said, hey, I think it's about time because we tried everything else. So he had a translation agency before, and I was on the buyer side. So we kind of got together and said, hey, let's build tools. And then I think it took us about, I don't know, a couple of weeks to settle on the topic of quality, because seeing it, the pains from both the buyer and the vendor side made it super easy to understand. Okay, this is one part that's not solved yet. Let's go and crack it. So yeah, this is kind of how it all got started, really. So the US immigration system and its complexities, I would say.
Well, speaking to the more specific side, what kind of strategies do you recommend implementing to improve the quality, efficiency, the LQM efficiency from your perspective?
Great, and a very multi-layered question, I guess. I think what we do at ContentQuo, let me see if I have a quick slide on that. We kind of focus on one part of the quality process, and this is the quality evaluation, right? But the surprising part is that there's a lot of work you have to do before you actually start doing quality evaluation. So I think you might have heard Cloud and Yova call this quality enablement, all right? So some people call it quality assurance or quality planning, right? There are many terms for that, but I think the best strategy to implementing what you would call, LQE is do the prep work before that. So this is really what we advise to all teams we talk to. If they haven't done, the basics, haven't laid down the foundations for achieving optimal, and I'm not saying the best, but I'm deliberately saying optimal linguistic quality for the different types of content that they're responsible for. Evaluation is kind of not super useful yet. So that's, I guess, is the best strategy. Do it in stages. There's a right time for everything. You cannot really do evaluation. You cannot really do what ContentQuo is best for unless you've kind of ticked all the boxes before that step. So do it in sequence, do it in a smart way, and then gradually introduce more parts of the entire quality workflow when when you got the previous level more or less settled and solved.
So my next question is about your product itself. When reviewing your LinkedIn page, I'm super interested in the end-to-end SaaS translation quality management platform in ContentQuo. I want to know more about the details about this product and compared to especially MS Excel, how it is compatible with different TMS while working very well. I'm super interested about these sites.
Great. Questions. Well, I'm not going to go into a full-blown ContentQuo explanation. I think this is a bit outside of the purpose of this conversation, but maybe I could give you some ideas. First, I think Excel is a great tool. Let me put it differently. Excel is good for pretty much everything, but it's not great for anything. All right. This is how I kind of tend to think about it. So if you ask, is it worth to learn Excel in depth? Absolutely. It has saved me, especially in my early career, countless hours and drove immeasurate value for the clients I was serving on the agency side and whatnot. But, and I think this is the key to automation in general, right? You have to be very conscious of the scale of your operations. and also kind of the growth pace that you are seeing, right? So when you're just starting out, Excel is actually a great tool for doing basic language quality work. It's kind of free, quote unquote. It's very like malleable, okay? So you can actually get it to do whatever you want. Super easy to run experiments of any kind around, your language quality process with Excel. So it is the best starting point for sure. But usually what happens next, and this is where we kind of go to the platform angle, is once you're ready to start scaling the process, especially this evaluation, the quality evaluation process that we specialize in, you inevitably find that the advantages of Excel actually become serious drawbacks. So now, because it's so malleable, any person working in your translation supply chain can actually break it. And then, bam, all of a sudden, you don't get feedback flowing. You don't get to see any metrics. You spend enormous amounts of time just trying to kind of fix the formulas or get the files in the right place at the right time, and so on and so forth, right? So kind of what is a benefit at an early stage becomes a major issue once you're ready to scale up any kind of process. And that's kind of the same with everything, right? You can do translation in early days with an Excel spreadsheet. There's no shame in that. If you just need to translate 100 words every year, this is the best tool for the job. You don't need to over-engineer it. But once you're going into the next layer of scale, right, this is where you can start to change things. So what we do at ContentQuo is kind of breaking it down into like three major areas that we focus on. First, there's the actual linguistic quality evaluation. So looking at a piece of translation, figuring out whether it's great for its intended purpose, is it average or is it poor, score that, and also drive feedback to the linguists that produced this translation, or maybe to the machine translation engineers that trained the engine which produced this translation. So we kind of work with both the human side and also the machine translation side of the story when it comes to evaluation. And actually two separate methodologies for each of that. The next bit is analytics. So once you have enough data, once you have enough measurements, you kind of need to start making sense of what they tell you, right? It's kind of fun to fill up your database with numbers, but if you cannot understand the trends, it's not completely useless, but it's not fully useful, right? So this is what we solve for next. So giving teams an insight into their language quality metrics, how the suppliers perform, how the languages are doing, maybe how the different product lines or different MT engines are doing, and so on and so forth. And yeah, the last but not the least is kind of when you do lots of quality evaluation at scale, just starting them and project managing them becomes a hassle. So that's kind of the last part of the platform. We're still building it now, and it's shipping in the next quarter. So this is automating kind of the program management parts of the quality game. So yeah, once you kind of get to the scale, you have to solve piece by piece, and this is a progression in which we also build the product. So you evaluate first. When you get enough data, you start to get insights from them. And then once you realize you're spending too much time to run the evaluations, this is where you can kind of automate on the next level. So this is, I think, also the right progression to make any process faster and more efficient. And remember that it still starts from Excel ultimately. So that's an invaluable tool to have in any localization team.
You mentioned several times that to start your company, it's like jumping from a cliff. So we really would like to know more about it. And we are interested how you build it like from scratch, right? So what are the challenges of establishing and running your company, especially abroad?
Well, first, I think we were really fortunate because we're doing it in Estonia, and this is probably one of the easiest countries in the world, definitely the easiest one in Europe to start and run a technology business, right? So it's just the whole country is the legislation and the tools that we have here, they're kind of designed specifically to make it easy. So that's like one barrier less. And actually anyone in the world can start and run an Estonian company remotely. We have this cool thing called e-residency. So you ladies can also, incorporate a company in Estonia and run it from the States or wherever else you might be in the world, fully digitally, fully online, and very affordable too. There are no crazy lawyer fees. Because in Estonia, you don't need a lawyer to open a company. You just go onto a platform, you do a couple of clicks, upload the documents. And the world record for incorporating a company in Estonia is 18 minutes. All right, that's 1/8, so less than 20 minutes from the application time till the company was actually registered in court and added to the corporate registry. They just did it, I think, this summer. Was a little bit of a show. So yeah, that's the easy part, right? It's literally, it takes you 20 minutes and $250 to start up a company in Estonia, regardless of where you are.
That's so interesting. Actually, I think I'm a foreign student. I'm actually from Russia, and Jihon is also a foreign student. So I think it's a good insight to understand how to build a company from scratch, to be honest. And how did you find your first client?
That's a really good question.
So you started the company and what's your next step?
You agonize about basically every single tiny thing and you think you must be doing it wrong because it's the first time in your life. First, I'm very lucky because I'm actually not the only founder. There are actually two of us. So Alexander here on slide is my co-founder and CTO. And so I got some benefit from him being a second time business owner. So that's definitely something I could recommend. So pairing up with somebody a bit more senior definitely makes the pressure a little bit less. But still, he ran a translation agency before. He's never built a tech company. So we kind of had to learn a lot together. Let me just go back to the timeline. So you can see it's actually fairly long. So we incorporated in 2015. And then we took a number of years in what I guess you would call stealth mode, all right, kind of trying to figure out what exactly we're building, how should it look like, how should it work, talking to many potential customers and users of the future platform, getting feedback, giving them beta access and so on and so forth. And then we finally launched it in 2018, so almost 4 years later after the incorporation. So as you can see, it's a journey. It's really not instant. And I think the challenge for me initially, especially coming from the corporate sector and having run a localization program before and then a global localization team, when you're in that kind of role, your responsibilities are really well defined. You know exactly what needs to be done. Actually doing that might be, challenging, right? So there are many things you have to work through or, against people, processes, technology, bureaucracy, budgets, whatever. But at least you have an idea of what you need to achieve. I think in many companies, there's a good culture of setting goals. And, if you've been in localization around, you kind of understand in general, okay, we take this piece of content, we take this product, we adapt it for the global markets. We sell more, we get more customers, we retain more customers, right? So this is actually a very clearly defined and very narrow, if I might say, scope of work. But what was different for me when we plunged off the cliff was there was nobody there to tell us what to do anymore, okay? There are no goals. There is no path towards success that somebody kind of, draws ahead of you. You kind of make it up as you go, right? And for me, having run like a 20 to 25 person team across 5 different countries, I thought I was up to the challenge. I was actually not. I had no clue what to get myself into because suddenly it's like driving a car in a winter storm, right? So the snow starts and it covers the windshield. You're kind of driving, but you have no idea where the hell you're going and who is actually driving up right against you in your face. You can see them, right? So this is kind of the feeling that I think I had in the first year, just really, really fuzzy. You might get lucky and wipe a bit of snow off the windshield for like 10 seconds and you understand, are you like going uphill or downhill? Are you turning left or right? But this is about it, right? And then it kind of becomes all blurry again. So just clearing the fog and making sure that you run towards something that looks like a good goal. That's, I think, the biggest challenge, right? But it gets easier with time as you get feedback from the market, as you understand what your potential users might actually want or need, as you start actually prototyping things and directly exposing it to the user. So gradually the fog cleared. We were very, very clear on which direction we're going. And yeah, this is how we kind of made it. Hope that gives you some, if not a direct feeling, but at least like a representation of how we felt in the early days. It's super difficult, actually. Not knowing what you're going to do next and not knowing why or whether that's the right thing to do. It takes some getting used to, but now I'm super comfortable with uncertainty. And I think that's the main skill for a founder, a would-be founder, just accepting that nobody has the right answers, right? And being comfortable and embracing that really blurry view ahead of you and being ready to turn the wheel at any time or at any second, basically. So yeah, that's startup life for you.
I see. And since you like worked in different countries, Russia, Estonia, I'm curious, like, what are the differences with dealing in different countries with localization, if there are some?
Good question. I think there's no major differences between the two countries I've been privileged to, or ashamed in some cases, to call home. But if you look at a larger picture of the world, I think Europe is significantly different from the States, right? And this is also, for me back in the day, when I actually wanted to join a localization team in the US, this was kind of the driver, right? So I actually wanted to see how US tech companies run localization, because even now, and we talk to dozens of companies every quarter, it's not the same in Europe as it is in the States. The level of scale and sophistication in the States is quite more advanced and mature. And I think US companies are not afraid to design the localization processes and programs for huge scale in very early days. All right. So very ambitious, very forward thinking. Europe is very different. I think like the local tech companies, they have a much more like a scrappier mentality. They try to do the minimum. Okay. The minimum that's possible to get a product successfully launched in a given market or two. So they start building for scale and for complexity, usually quite late in the process. And that, for me, kind of summarizes the fundamental differences I have noticed over the years between US companies doing localization and European companies doing localization. Kind of counterintuitive, because in Europe, we have lots of languages at our doorstep, basically from forever. And the US is a little bit less linguistically diverse, but that's the reality, right? The localization approaches, kind of the strategies and the overall feel are completely different. So yeah, this is maybe one thing I've picked up over the years.
Thank you. That's really very interesting because, when I was in Russia, I didn't really know about localization. And I think it's not really something which is super developed in the country. And when I came to the US, I realized during mid-February, but we don't really have another perspective like around the world. So it was really very interesting to know more about it. And I want to pass my word to Lynn.
Thank you, Nora. So our group specifically within LocReady, we discuss topics surrounding products, like software product. So you've been a PM working with software products. What are some pitfalls that young localization professionals should be aware of when working with product localization?
Yeah, I spent, I think the majority of my 13 years spent in like producing localization, working with product and software. So I have a lot to say. Maybe one bit of advice first, and then also some observations. I think what was very helpful when I came over to the buyer side to run a product localization program at a tech company, what was really beneficial having agency side experience. So that's still a perspective that's not common inside a buyer side org. Outside the localization team, many people still don't know how content is produced in many languages at scale. So having that first-hand experience on how this kind of work is managed and arranged, and what kind of things are pitfalls in producing localized content at scale, I think this was super important to me. And maybe not having that kind of exposure might make your impact a little bit more limiting. I think it's important for a young professional to personally have gone through actually localizing software, actually doing translator interaction on a day-to-day basis, right? So this is what I really believe in, taking in all the parts of the localization process, right? Not just the buyer side or the vendor side. And then the observation that I kind of keep returning to over the years, both in the localization trenches and now kind of standing a little bit aside and building tools to make the life in the trenches easier. I think most industry professionals, and myself, my earlier self included in that list, by the way, they overestimate the importance of technology. They overestimate the importance of language, which might sound surprising. So we're talking localization, right? But they do vastly underestimate the value and the importance of people and relationships in an organization, right? So what I believe now, being mostly in the sales and customer-facing role, okay, but still is the hardest part of any localization job is the people-to-people part, right? It's making people change their perception, right? It's helping people understand the complexity, driving change, or selling, as I call it. This is the difficult part of the job. I think it's really easy those days to learn about new tech, and even Miss is doing a fantastic job at this, and I think other schools around the world are trying to catch up. It's easy to learn about the right process to run, okay? And you can kind of pick up the theory. Help people are even writing books on localization now. I wish I had that back in 2002 when I got started. I wish I had access to them. But what's really difficult to learn from books and from courses is, how to actually work with people. And to this day, this is the hardest, but also the most important part of the job, right? And this will never be automated away as long as humans are in charge of organizations and not AI, right? I hope I will not see the day where this would get to change. So yeah, it's a people job, basically. And I think that's the most important aspect of it. And we all have to focus a bit more on that, just because we need to compensate for too much language, too much process, and too much tech that otherwise kind of, is always around us.
I think you're definitely right, especially when it comes to buyer side, because there's so much interaction that you're doing as the LPM, working with internal stakeholders and the vendors. And so you really have to get people to people on that.
Pretty much so. This is what I learned the hard way, if I might add, because I'm making tremendous amount of mistakes and cross-cultural mishaps of all types when I joined the buyer side. So definitely to be a well-rounded professional, you need, at least two sides of the industry in your portfolio, right? So buyer side, vendor side, or, tech versus services, right? Whatever that might be. As long as you can see those people and work with those people from different angles, I think that might really set you up for a great career, whatever you choose to do in this industry.
Nice. So last question, when it comes to quality management, which is your expertise, what advice do you have for young localization professionals who might one day be working on their own quality management system or process?
Yeah, maybe one advice. If you can, please learn what's already out there and avoid reinventing the wheel. So one thing that has actually changed, or even over the 8 years almost we've been building ContentQuo, is how much more information and training and standards that are available those days that you could simply read or access as a student. Test the tools, talk to professionals. The size of this body of knowledge has grown tremendously, and I think this is really the way to advance it. So kind of standing on the shoulders of the previous generation instead of trying to do it all again from scratch, right? Usually that works better and saves time. You will not have to make the same mistakes as we did when we were running our own quality programs or automated our own quality programs. So yeah, kind of standards is your friends, and talking to existing professionals and learning from their courses and trainings is definitely something I would recommend. I wish I knew as much as I do now, in 2015 when we started this company. I had to learn on the job what it is to manage language quality at scale and how to make it run faster. So yeah, for sure. I think especially for students, you are in an ideal position. This is probably the best localization school in the world in 2022 to kind of absorb and learn from some of the most forward-thinking people in the industry. So yeah, please do your homework.
I think that's definitely true. Being resourceful and just getting out there, looking for those resources, whether it's like a person or it's what they've written. There's so much content nowadays, and it's just readily available. You just have to search for it and be motivated to do that.
Absolutely.
It's a very useful skill.
One teeny tip on top of that. I kind of mostly worked in the private sector during my, localization management career. But what we've learned over the years building ContentQuo is that the public sector can be incredibly advanced and forward-thinking. So, of course, I'm a bit impartial. It's here in Europe. European Union is incredibly multilingual. This is one of the most advanced multilingual public sector organizations in the world. They're actually doing great things when it comes to process. They operate at tremendous scale every day under very tight constraints as well. And this is why they actually develop some very unique processes, and they have some amazing people working for those organizations. So I kind of used to shun public sector when I was a localization manager. I was thinking it's boring or it's very narrow-minded. Nothing could be further from the truth. So if you have a chance to dig into what the European Parliament or the European Commission is doing, and they're very open about it, they have their own conferences, which are free to attend as well, so that you could easily learn how they operate. And if you get a shot to work for any kind of this organizations, this is an amazing and enriching experience. The work they do on quality is fascinating. I was in Luxembourg just last week and spent pretty much the whole day talking to the quality people at the Parliament and the Commission. And, I've learned so much, as I normally do when I talk to them. So yeah, public sector can be a great source of inspiration as well, at least on our, on the European side of the Atlantic. Lots of things are happening here.
Thank you. And any last words before we end our recording today?
It's been a pleasure, and thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you so much, Kirill.